Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Okay, that's enough.
So this is Salai Abrams, CEO of Truth and Reality, and I am sitting here with Mr. Tom Burrell, who is the author of the book Brainwashed, as well as the founder and chairman emeritus of Burrell Communications. Tom and I are here. I'm getting ready to leave Chicago to head back to New York, but we wanted to have a brief conversation just to talk a little bit about media messaging, project that he has been involved with, dedicated much of his life for the last, what is it, a decade?
Well, it really depends on when it may have started. Actually, in the middle of my career as in the advertising agency business, that's when I first came to this kind of realization, this kind of the connection, the nexus between persuasive communications and racial oppression. You know, things that I had not put together before. It starts like, whoa, because what happens is that you're looking. We specialized in the African American market segment, and the whole thesis, the basis of our being in business was the fact that black people and that dark-skinned white people, they're different. And then when you start looking at selling them things on the basis of those differences, then you start asking the question, wait a minute, why are we spending all of our money on high-priced status items? And why are we spending so much money on things that have to do with cleanliness and hygiene? Way out of proportion to the general market. And you say, well, how did this happen? And then you start going into it and realizing that those things are all based on the myth of black inferiority. You know, you're buying high quality items because you want to buy status to make up for the fact that you don't have any. You're buying cleaning things, deodorants and household cleaners, and you just scrub it. And what are you trying to do? You're trying to be clean because you've been told that you're dirty, that you're not human. And so that's the beginning of the whole, what I call first career after my advertising career.
Yep.
That morphed right into the looking into these issues more closely, and that's what led to my writing the book.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've read Brainwashed, and for those of you who are tuned in, if you haven't read Brainwashed, you definitely should go pick up a copy because it is explosive and unapologetic in the way in which Tom really dissects the various segments of our being, the way in which we are impacted by these media messages. And what I really like about Brainwashed is that it offers a solution, proposed solutions for us to combat the myth of black inferiority. And so when I reached out to you, I think it was like a cold call email that I had sent, which was probably about 3, maybe 4 years ago, which has eventually led to this point where we have been doing some work together now for, gosh, I don't know, let's just call it 1.5 years.
Okay.
Through the Howard University Media Messaging Fellowship, and now with your support of the Redefining Her Story documentary. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today was why, I know that people in your position get asked, by a lot of people to help out with different things. Everybody's got something to sell. We all have something to sell, right? And at your stage in your career,
right now, I'm at a stage now where I don't have anything to sell.
Right. At this stage, you're not selling anything. I was going to say, right? I was saying, at this stage of your career, and then I stopped myself because I'm like, you're kind of retired.
Yeah.
But, what is it that, has, and this is just, I'm going to be honest right here. Look, y'all, this is self-promotion going on, but also it's education. Because what I'm hoping is that you'll really understand the breadth of the work that Truth and Reality is attempting to achieve, and that this is not a joke, that the work that we're doing is not a joke, and it's something that I've dedicated myself to, and I've been really blessed to learn under the tutelage of you, Tom. Why is it you think that that Truth and Reality actually has a shot at making a dent in this issue?
Well, I'm not so sure that it's a rational thing. I think that, let me just say that it's a very important thing to be doing. My belief is that this is the real 800-pound gorilla in the room that keeps us where we are, keeps us down. Mm-hmm. Media messaging, propaganda, whatever you want to call it, from the time we got here, has been working to keep us in our categories that have been identified by other people. I think it's killing us. So what that leads me to is that if we're on this earth and we're taking up space on this earth, we need to do something, and do something useful. There is something about struggle that is inherently a part of our birth, our makeup. Mm-hmm. And I'm not so sure that I see how it's going to happen. I just know that it does have to happen, mm-hmm. and that we've got to keep trying, keep moving, and looking for that soft spot to break through. There is a kind of a paradox here that in order to be successful at getting things done in this society, media has become so pervasive that you need media in order to get through mm-hmm. to people. That's mm-hmm. what mass media, you got to get through. What we're basically doing is we are criticizing or critiquing, and in media's view, maybe even they see it as attacking mm-hmm. media. Mm-hmm. So media is not so inclined to say, come on in. We're going to give you coverage so you can attack us.
Right.
So that's the irony of this whole thing. And so that's what we got to basically figure out. The closest thing that I have come to is that we need to use the free media. The mm-hmm. free media is the new media, mm-hmm. the social media, mm-hmm. until such time that gets clogged up too, and they start monetizing that. Right. And there have been a few attempts at that so far. Yeah. So far unsuccessful. But we need to be taking full advantage of the fact that we can do these kinds of things that we're doing now, that we can actually take a cell phone and create information and have it disseminated and get 30,000, 300,000, 3 million, whatever it is, hits. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have to go through the conventional means in order to get the message through. And so I think that getting people like you and your organization working on these things and finding a way to monetize it so that it can live is a very worthwhile thing to be trying to do, especially given someone with your intellect, with your drive and determination, and your knowledge of the situation. it's really very fortunate to have you out here doing this thing, and it gives me a sense of relief that somebody, and there are a couple people that I'm working with, people who are out here who get it and who have all those qualities that I just named in order to get the story out there. Because it took about, frankly, at least 400 years to build up the time of the beginning of colonialism, even before the founding of this nation. It started, it started because it was necessary for the oligarchy to establish a safety net for themselves by taking a class issue and turning it into a race issue, separating poor black people from poor white people by saying, hey, you're like us. It's interesting that that's what's being played out right today with the Trump thing.
Right.
But that's the way it started.
Ultimately, it is about the maintaining of financial control.
Yes, by the few.
Right.
Actually, and the control is actually controlling white people, and black people, and part of controlling of white people is controlling white people to be against their peers who are black, you know. But anyway, getting back to the point, if truth and reality didn't exist, somebody would need to invent it. Fortunately, it does exist, and that's why I am so supportive of it. Because as far as I know, it's by far the most advanced thing we have right now to fight this battle, and so I'm for it. That's what I'm devoting my time in life to, and that is to identify and support those people who get it and who are out here trying to do the work.
Well, let me see. So for those of you who are tuned in, we've got just a few minutes left before I have to head out to the airport and leave this beautiful, beautiful, cold and windy city.
It's not windy today.
Oh, it's not windy today? Oh, okay. Well, I'll know once I walk outside. But
cold is enough.
Cold is enough in Chicago. So for those of you who've been tuning in, do any of you have any specific questions that you wanted to ask Tom about his work around media messaging, anything around what we've discussed so far? Would love to hear from you. So if you want to type that up. I see you joined, Natasha. Good morning, Natasha. Because this issue is something that, I agree with you that it is an imperative. It is an absolute imperative that we're not going to be able to really address, for example, one issue that is extremely at the forefront of our consciousness as a people is police brutality, or the school to prison pipeline. And how is it that the programming of minds, white and black minds, and those outside of that who are silent and therefore complicit in the perpetuation of white supremacy and black inferiority, how is it that we can truly create that change, the institutional change, without getting to the root of that issue, which is the programming of our minds, the minds of the individuals first and foremost, which will then trickle to, okay, outside of contributing, how can we, the general public, help create change? Okay, yeah. So outside of contributing, how can people contribute towards this larger change? That was a question. So,
okay, well, First thing is to become aware. After you become aware, and I would suggest following Truth and Reality and what work they're doing, reading the book. Once you become aware, then the next thing to do is to become a media watcher, to be a decoder, to be able to look at messages and understand what is being said and what is being said is doing to you and doing to our minds and to our attitudes. And once you understand that, then maybe try to explain it to other people, especially as you see them display responses and behavior patterns that show that they're not aware of what's being done to them. So it's a matter of speaking up. Once you know, then you know, without getting preachy, just say, do you have any feelings about what the projection of that particular image is doing or saying to you about who you are and who we are as a people, and then basically become a kind of a strategic disciple, a strategic advocate for people understanding what is being transmitted into their unconscious mind that leads to behavior and attitudes and behavior that are not in our best interest, self-destructive behavior, so to speak. So that's what you could do to start.
And so that right there, what you mentioned, touches on two of the three tagline. In our tagline, we say "Wake up," "Speak up,"
Mm-hmm.
and then third is "Rise up."
Yeah.
And I wanted to. There's two questions that I have remaining for the time that we have together, and the first will be around the wake up. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Bald Man 12. It's the rise up portion. When we look at the toppling of apartheid, when we look at the destruction of the modern day sequariums, as is, for lack of a better term, right? The destruction of that industry, of the captivity of cetaceans. There's been these movements, even the anti-smoking movement, right? Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. Back in the day, everybody, you would drink and drive, and it wasn't a thing.
Right.
You would get in this car without a seatbelt, and it wasn't a thing.
Right.
You would smoke in the presence of your child. You smoked while you were pregnant,
Sure.
not a thing.
Sure.
And so, as far as the rise up component, what is it that, is it only going to be economic sanctions that ultimately will create this change that we want to see? Because right now, the work that we're doing is waking people up, because there are far too many people that don't understand how vital this issue is. They just see it as a,
Right.
some what do we call it, the Sedity Committee? Just some folks who are pandering respectability politics, who've got an issue with Lee Daniels or Mona Scott or whatever, and are imposing our views on what we think respectable media should be, which is totally missing the point, and really and ignoring and therefore kind of dismissing the validity of the statement. So what is it that we can do?
Again, the paradox is that we as a society have been so conditioned to be drawn into what the Romans call bread and circuses. We are addicted to entertainment and to be entertained. And we want to be entertained from the time we wake up until the time we go down. Mm-hmm. And we are totally enthralled and engrossed in being entertained. There was one, was it Postman's book, Amusing Ourselves to Death? Mm-hmm. And that's basically what we are doing. So it's very difficult to get people to give up their shows, to give up their amusement. I know, and even when they know it's bad, they can't give it up. I know it's not, they use the term guilty pleasure a lot. I know it's not good looking at these images. And
I wouldn't let my kids watch it, but I'm going to watch it.
But I can't give it up. It's a little bit like cigarettes.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good.
And so that's a tough one. I think we have to really figure out how to break that through. It's like people saying there was a kid, a friend of ours, they were sitting in a movie and they were watching a movie with the kid, and they were kind of conditioned to look at these media cues, and so they talked to the kid about it. So the kid's looking at the parents and looking at the movie, and he said, "You guys, I'm getting ready to mess up my movie. You're ruining my movie. I'm trying to enjoy this movie, and I can see you getting all analytical about it." And that's what happens.
Can't you just be entertained? Can't you just let it be?
Let it.
A rose be a rose.
Just let us be entertained.
Right.
And we put down our placards at a certain time so we can go home and watch something on television.
A lot of these shows are speaking to what we're lacking inside.
A lot of these shows are speaking to the baser parts of our nature, and a lot of these things are speaking to our comfort in the. Sometimes negativity can get comfortable.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that we know and that we love. Whether it's the fighting in your video. You talk about the kid who says that people fighting, it shows that they care.
Yeah, if you're fighting, it shows you care about each other.
So we adapt those things and say there's something good in it, and so that gives us license, permission to go and indulge in it, and we find the better part of it, and for me, it's still more of a question than an answer how you get to that.
Oh, okay.
But it really is the fact that we are so addicted to entertainment and to being amused and enthralled and engaged in looking at the baser side of life. I mean, these. Maury Povich doesn't go off the air.
Yeah, that's true. Maury's been around forever.
That stuff doesn't go off the air.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
We are. That's where we are, and we're there not because it's a natural thing with us. It's because we've been brainwashed. That's a diversion that we have been fed. You guys go ahead and get involved in this, so we can keep doing our, keep making our money. And we'll monetize it, and we'll make money off of it.
Natasha just mentioned that it's a way to distract us from what's really going on in our life, and
yes.
I think, and I believe, like in a way, to what extent that it is intentional, I do believe it's a way to lull the masses to sleep.
Absolutely.
In order for those at the top to be able to continue to do what they're doing.
Keep skimming.
Right.
Scamming and skimming.
Right. Oh, gosh, I missed that last comment from Natasha. You might want to repeat that. So in terms of the economic sanctions, do you, just really quickly before I move on to the last question, do you think that is ultimately what's going to help this tip, or you're not certain at this point?
I am absolutely certain that, to kind of paraphrase Frederick Douglass's comment, is that the change. He used the term demand. I don't think demand is enough. Economic coercion.
Economic coercion.
Power concedes nothing without economic coercion.
Power concedes nothing without economic coercion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not demand, because demand is just a strong ask.
Demand is a strong ask. Yeah.
But coercion is you have got to do this. If you don't, it's going to be at your expense, your peril.
Right.
And nothing gets to this society like deprivation of profit.
So Natasha said two things. She said, one, we spend so many hours consuming media. Think of what we could actually be doing to create change if we leverage those hours in another direction. That's one.
Yeah.
And then she made it was a question. She said economic coercion. Is that right?
Economic.
Yeah, economic coercion.
Economic.
Yep, she got it. She got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
the last thing that I wanted to do during our what is it? Our tea talk with Tom and Salai is respectability politics. You know, yesterday during our event, you know, millennials are very, very concerned with the notion of their media consumption being policing. That there is shaming, one sector of society as being not worthy of having less value than the quote respectable side of our society. And so, how do you feel? Let me think this through, because this is like a very loaded topic. What are your thoughts in terms of avoiding, because I know you're not about respectability politics, that I know, but how can we convey to those who may have an interest in this issue but who are concerned? Because, for example, with, who was the woman in the, she was your friend, the woman who did the Sony boycott way back in the day? Dolores Tucker.
Dolores Tucker.
Dolores Tucker, right. So Dolores Tucker led this big boycott and was burning records and,
bulldozing records.
Bulldozing records.
Steamrolling and all.
Right, and storming boardrooms. Yeah. And it never took off. For those like myself who at the time were in our early 20s, and this is before the misogyny in hip-hop really took root, and hip-hop changed from being almost explicitly a form of creative self-expression that was protest. It was very protest-driven, to where, today's most popular, and I'm not demonizing hip-hop overall, but I'm just saying, like, the primary messaging that from the most popular artists is often, steeped in misogyny and self-hate. Let's just leave it at that.
And also materialism.
And materialism, consumerism. So how is it that when you're talking about the generation gap, the assurance, how do we convey an assurance that this is not, I saw this one T-shirt by Rahel Tesfamary, and she wore "Not Your Mama's Civil Rights Movement." That this is not a repeat, because I think one of the reasons why what Dolores Tucker had done couldn't kick off with younger folks is because they felt like it was their grandmother, being very pious and wagging a finger and saying, "You young people just don't get it, and we're going to come in here and save you from yourselves." So how do we, with this work that we're doing, assure through our messaging, by making a clear statement that that's not what we're about, aside from just saying that's not what we're about?
Well, I think
what's the distinction?
You do it by not being about it. What you need is more people who are in my business, the business of skillfully persuading people to do things. And when you're trying to sell a hamburger or a car, you don't beat people over the head with it. You You do all the research, you do all of the testing, all of the advanced MRIs and stuff that determine how people operate and what they respond to, what their brain responds to, what the hippocampus and the amygdala and all that stuff, what it responds to, and you feed them those cues. You can't feed, frankly, trade secret, you can't feed them those cues with them looking right at the cues. You've got to sneak those cues into their system.
So you subliminal messaging.
Yeah, you have to do it skillfully.
Yeah.
And so you need skillful people who know how to sell things to people without, when you walk through a mall and they're shooting out these poofs of aroma that smell like baby powder.
Right.
And because they understand that going back to that time makes people want to stay there. So you get to find those cues that work on people's minds. You can't be direct. You can't be direct.
So then, with that being said, so ultimately, it's about having a subtle and effective message, using the media as the main.
Using communications skills.
Okay, using communication skills.
People who are steeped in the art and the science of selling things to people.
Of selling things. So,
because we have to sell an idea.
Right, because that's really what this is, right? We're selling the idea that we can topple the myth of black inferiority, that we actually can combat white supremacy with a stronger message coming of really black. What was that? This is great. I have my staff huddled around my phone right now. That's awesome. Thank you for doing that. So being skillful. So we have to be skillful. We have to be subtle. We have to be direct. We have to be focused. We have to understand the psychology of media consumers, and provide a message that will infiltrate and slowly replace the black inferiority myth with one that is accurate. And also empower, really empower.
It doesn't even have to be accurate. It has to be positive. It has to combat the negative.
Got it. Right. Got it. So to combat the negative.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to use the same stealth, the same kind of skill to get you out of a problem that was used to get you into it.
Yep. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay, so there was another question. So to Tom, is there any reading that you would recommend?
Oh my God, yeah. I got a whole bunch of stuff.
A whole bunch of stuff.
I send out reading lists to people. I would suggest Brainwashed. I would suggest Carter G. Woodson's book, the Miseducation of the Negro. I would suggest William McChesney, The Problem of the Media by William McChesney. I would suggest Amusing Ourselves to Death by a guy named Postman. I've got a list that I send out to young people when they ask that question. It consists of about 20 books. Because everything that I'm doing is focused on this one aspect of what you might call the civil rights movement, and that is the media literacy component of it. Because I still contend that of all the forces that are out here, parents, teachers, ministers, etc., there is no power greater when it comes to affecting attitudes and behavior than media messaging.
Yeah, it's called.
But that's a hard sell.
It is a hard sell. I mean, media psychologists, they call media is the super peer. It's the super peer. And so for young people, the challenge for parents, as an example, or educators, teachers, the people who are in authority figures in people's lives, trying to combat what children have internalized as the ultimate super peer. Unlike your parent, the television, the internet, whatever you're looking for, it's there 24/7.
Absolutely.
And it will give you whatever it is that you want.
It's working on you.
And it's working on you. And unfortunately, that super peer, you're self-directing, you're choosing the message, and unfortunately, you're not even conscious of the impact. You don't know if you're 8 and you're watching certain types of programs, whether it's good, healthy, or unhealthy for your mind, body, and spirit.
Sure.
You're just entertained.
Sure.
So there's no distinction, but it's still being programmed. You're still being programmed.
Just imagine if your child, before you are taught how to eat, and you put out an array of food. You put out some broccoli, you put out some carrots, but then you put out some chocolate and some Twix and some,
junk food.
Kit Kats and Butterfingers and stuff. But you have no idea about nutrition. What are you going to eat?
I'm eating the Twix.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm eating the Twix.
Exactly, and you're going to eat the ice cream and the candy and the stuff. Right. And so that's where we are.
Because it gives you that immediate rush.
Yeah.
Right? And yeah. So Natasha had asked, could you repeat those lists? No, but what I'll do is I'll get that list and I will post that reading list on Truth and Reality's website as a resource for everybody who's watching so that they can actually utilize that. And then the last thing someone had asked, and this is truly the last, not like the last, but the last statement was a man had said, you had said the messaging doesn't even have to be accurate at one point, right? And so there's a question mark like, huh? So can you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, all I'm saying is that what we are interested in, I don't want to seem diabolical, but what we are interested in is affecting positive change. So hyperbole is permissible in affecting positive change. Being not exactly accurate, but being over accurate, being beyond that. In other words, there is something to be said for the work of people like Francis Welsing and other people who basically say to black kids that you once were kings and that you are better than. You are better than because you have come from a far more distant place and you're still here.
Right.
You are better than.
Right.
Now, maybe the accurate thing to say is you're the same as. We don't know for sure. So, but if our job is to bolster the ego and the self-esteem of that child, then maybe you have to enhance their image of who they are to compensate where they're coming from. So I'm just basically saying that accuracy is a good thing, but that's not the objective. You stick to what your objective is. The objective is to save people from this whole myth of black inferiority, and then it gets down to whatever it takes.
And so, in closing, I mean, with what you just shared, I think a good example in popular media, in television in the 80s, was, even though the when I say this, it's very loaded, was the Cosbys.
Sure.
And while there were those who lambasted the show as being inaccurate.
That's a good example.
But it was aspirational to many who looked at that show and said, I could achieve, a home that has financial security, that I, even though I may not have come from this, could create my own version of this life.
We used to do the same thing in advertising when we would do commercials, and when there was a preponderance of single parent households, and we would put a father in, and that resonated with everybody. It resonated with those people where there wasn't a father there, because people, again, this aspirational thing, and when I grow up I want to be a father, and it resonated with those where there were fathers there, and it shored up that they were being recognized.
Right.
It wasn't statistically necessarily statistically accurate, but to your point, it was aspirational.
Right.
And
I
that's
think
the way
there's
we operate.
and I don't think there, and I think my final thought is there's nothing wrong with aspiring for greatness. And I think in this day and age where we're seeking authenticity at times, I think it's important to be authentic, but also we should not be shamed for wanting more. I think that the pursuit of excellence is a good thing. I'm not talking about looking at those who are the exceptionalism, and championing that as any type of indicator of equality or equity in our society between, whites and blacks. I'm not suggesting that, but I do think that there is something important about, as individuals, using each day, as you say, to squeeze the juice out of it and to live our lives fully and manifesting all of our talents to the best of our ability, because our time on this earth is limited. And we each have a day that we can choose whether we are going to add to the pain and suffering that exists, to the collusion that is occurring and the lies that are being perpetuated on us and that we're taking in, or are we going to speak truth to power and actually lead by example? To be, as I say, a living epistle. So I think that is, for me, something that I hope to infuse in this work, is that when people see me showing an example of a woman like Serena Williams in the video trailer for redefining her story, as well as Ursula Burns and Misty Copeland, someone said to me, well, what's your view on respectability politics? I said, well, why do you ask? And she said, well, because at the end of the film, you have all these examples of these women who are really successful. And I said, well, you're just looking at it at the top level. Serena Williams comes from Compton. She comes from nothing. Misty Copeland was essentially in foster care, comes from poverty. Ursula Burns started out as an intern. You're looking at the end result and making an assumption, and I think right there, let's be real. There is a story. Redefining her story, I think, means acknowledging where we come from and the paths that we travel to transform our lives and to heal. And I think that there is something beautiful in that. And so was there anything that you wanted to add before we close out? And I thank all of you for tuning in. No, I think that you're right. The idea of showing the end result is a very important point, because you're not there doesn't mean that you can't get there. Yeah. And a lot of people actually believe that they can't get there because they're not there. Right. And even, and for those of you who are not familiar with Tom's personal journey, I'll be the one to say it. Go online and Google and learn more about the work, coming from the south side of Chicago and starting out in the mailroom and working your way up and eventually building this agency. That was a very revolutionary act. And not many people do it, but it's not done by accepting the status quo, by not pushing boundaries, by not challenging authority, by not by not doing acts, by living your life and doing things that are quite subversive and against the existing standards. So I just thank you for taking time this morning to talk to everybody here, and I hope that you all have a great day, and peace out. Okay, thank you. This is for Sarai. It's Jackie from the office.
Probably wanting to know about the shipment.